Well, I know what 90% of you are here for, so might as well just get that audience retention out of the way. This is my friend that I gave the disc to for Christmas, and this is his first hole playing with it. This disc only weighs 92 grams and he's not used to throwing it, so I promise he's not that bad at putting in real life with real discs. He also decided to try jump putting just for 2 flatfish in the genus Hippoglossus. And here's a good old huck. Here you can see the flight profile, and it's kind of interesting. The disc gives you an audible sign when you release badly. And we arrive at the boring part of the video, so I don't fault you if you want to tune out. So let's get started with a little bit about this project. I made this disc for my friend for Christmas. He has a zone, and I saw that it was a flat top disc, which means that it would be easy to machine. Here I am drilling the holes for locating the disc because I need to do a top and bottom operation. The first hole ended up getting drilled a bit too deep and bottomed out the machine, so I rotated it 90 degrees, re-drilled the hole, everything was fine. Now, there were a couple other issues that I had during machining, but this was not one of them. The 2 pins worked very well for locating, and it was pretty nice. So here I'm going to go ahead and test the dowel that I'm going to use to locate, and I went ahead and marked bottom right just because I didn't want to mess up. If my x-axis was a little out of square or something, I just wanted to make sure that I was always putting bottom right in the bottom right. And it would hopefully line up. I think that's how that works. So here I'm tapping it down, making sure everything is level, and I'm going to go ahead and add some jank clamps because I have not printed enough regular clamps. Then I'll go ahead and do a Z-probe because I'm referencing off the bottom middle of my stock. The reason I decided to reference off the bottom middle was because, as I said, this zone is a flat top putter, which means hopefully, foreshadowing, I could flip it over and just use the pre-flat side. Now here I'm doing an adaptive clear, and you can see I'm using an upcut bit, which means that I'm getting a lot of stringing. Now I do have compression bits, but they are only in 1/8 sizes, so I figured it'd be easier to just hog out all the material as fast as possible, and that'll all get cleaned up when I do my cleanup operations. Now, something I didn't know about adaptive toolpaths is that they're actually meant to use more of the cutting surface than like a pocketing or a contour would. And the reason why that's important is because you paid for the entire end mill, you know, might as well use it, right? So you can actually take huge amounts, like 2 or 3 times the diameter and depth of cut off at once, which I am definitely doing here. So I ended up taking 2 passes and then 1 cleanup pass. That cleanup pass was just in case, you know, there was any strands or anything left over or a little bit of flakiness, but I didn't end up needing it, so I could have done it in 2 passes, no problem. Now here I am doing a scallop operation with that 6mm bit, and I don't know if this was good or bad, but basically it's going to give the round over bit clearance to get in there and smooth everything out with another scallop. Now this round over operation here with the 6mm bit did not have a lot of step over or anything, but it did do what it was supposed to do, which is good. Now you can see on the right there I actually bought extra collet nuts, and I think that was a really good purchase because it lets me keep my 1/4 inch collet, 6mm collet, and 1/8 inch collet all ready to go, so I just have to unscrew the collet nut and put the new one in, and it's actually pretty nice. I kind of like it. And you can see I went ahead and probed the Z and started my scallop operation, which is basically just a bunch of circles. Now that Z probing operation will be the cause of an issue in a second, but for now it's working fine. So I highly recommend coming up with a macro to probe your Z, because Man, doing it manually just kind of sucks, having to jog over and probe it. And here's a kind of side view, so you can see all those strings are getting cleaned up, and it's turning out pretty nice. And there it is, so go ahead and clean out the dust underneath, remove all the clamps, and push the pins through because I'm going to use them on the other side. Make sure I line up the bottom right with the bottom right, and go ahead and probe the Z, and fingers crossed. And here comes the first big machining mistake. It was not supposed to take off material that close to the center. What happened was my material was about 19 or 20 millimeters, and I had calculated it out to be 18. Since I was referencing this top surface from the bottom, it ended up cutting a millimeter or two too deep. And so I said screw it and just let the operation continue. I should not have had to do a facing operation or anything, but you know, fix your mistakes, whatever you can do. Now at this point I was going to go ahead and just round it over and then fix it all up with my sander. But here comes the second big mistake. I didn't probe, and I ended up crashing the thing, which is fine because it was still X and Y zeroed, except then I ended up pressing reset 0. I meant to just zero the Z axis, but yeah, I ended up ruining everything. So I had to sort of guess where the X axis zeros should be. I didn't move the Y at all, which was good, but I managed to find it super close, which was good. Probe the Z, and I figured, you know what, I'll just fix that and face the thing off. So I accidentally ended up with like a millimeter thick flight plate, and it'll reveal another problem. I had this really nice veneer on the front, and then, yeah, there's a knot. So that kind of sucked. The other thing, the flight plate's only a millimeter thick and there's nothing under it, so it ended up in a lot of chatter and a lot of damage to the flight plate surface, which kind of sucks. Now there's an easy fix, basically just zero against the top and have the zero for the part be on the top center, and no matter what the thickness then, it will always cut to the right depth, which would be very much ideal because a 3mm flight plate would, I think, behave a lot better than the 1mm. Right now it's a little bit too overstable for a zone, but it is a zone based on all other measurements. Now I noticed something interesting while this operation was going on. If you've ever seen those like resonant plate experiments, the chips on the thing actually started to do that, so I took a video of it. But essentially, you know, the top, it was moving around. It's not a homogeneous surface or anything, so they don't actually make nice patterns, but it was just kind of interesting to see in certain spots it was moving and in certain spots it wasn't. And it seemed to shift around based on where in the wood it was cutting because, you know, the grain and stuff would create different resonance patterns. So here I got a little bit nervous because I was 2mm below my target depth. So I had left a little bit of a skin to keep the part centered, but I didn't know when it was going to break through now because obviously I was 2mm away, or whatever. So as you can see, I was putting pliers down to hold it down, which in hindsight wasn't the brightest idea because I was probably shifting it, but I had my other hand on the stop button, basically just ready to stop it whenever it broke through. And once it broke through, it was close enough on the other side to just break it out, and there it is. So you can see the facing operation, you know, kind of left some cross grain on there, and it wasn't great, but I think overall it turned out pretty good. Now I am a bit of a pessimist. I always like to think that I could do things a lot better, but I'm happy with how it turned out. And I think the only other major issue I had was a little bit of separation of layers on the bottom of the rim, and I think that was just because I was using glued together strips of 3mm wood, and if I would have had like 3/4 or something, it would have been a lot better. So I think I'm going to try to make a couple of these as a side hustle, so if you're interested, you know, shoot me a comment or something and I'll give an Etsy link. But I think overall it was a good project, and I need to make another one because there's so much I could do better. This is Caleb. Thanks for watching. See you soon.